In Grandma's Attic by Arleta Richardson, illustrated by Dora. Chapter 9. Nellie and the Buttons. "Look, Grandma," I said. "Here are 6 buttons just alike, and they look like they've been chewed. What were these on?" I had been in bed a long time recovering from diphtheria, and Grandma had given me the basket to keep me company. Since the basket was full of buttons of all shapes and sizes, I never ran out of entertainment. But now she came to the bed where the buttons were spread out. "Those were my coat buttons, and they were chewed," she said. Since I was the only girl in our family until I was almost grown up, I never had to wear hand-me-down dresses as some of my friends did. Ma made all our clothes, even Pa's and the boys', but if I did have my own dresses, my coats were nearly always cut down from the boys' coats when they were outgrown. This winter Reuben needed a new coat, but Roy did not, so Ma decided to make my winter coat out of Reuben's old one. He was growing so tall that he had only worn it 1 year and the wool was still good. Ma took it apart carefully, cleaned and brushed the pieces, and soon there was a nice new coat for me. I liked the coat very much, but I did want new buttons on it. Ma thought not. These were good buttons and would look fine just as they had on Reuben's coat. "But Ma," I protested, "everyone will know that it was Reuben's coat with those old buttons on it. Why can't I have some pretty new ones? They don't cost much." Pa was sympathetic and offered to go to town for buttons, but Ma would not hear of it. We didn't need to spend money for something that wasn't necessary. When Ma had her mind made up, there was no point in wasting time trying to change it. So I resigned myself to the old buttons and began to be anxious for the weather to turn cold so I could wear the coat. When it did get cold, though, we discovered something that no one had counted on. Reuben was the oldest boy, and since he had been small, he had followed Pa around the farm and tried to help. He was personally acquainted with every animal on the place, and they were all close friends. Whenever Reuben went to the barn or field, the horses, cows, pigs, and sheep came to be talked to and rubbed. Reuben had named each one and seemed to have time to give them all some attention. Pa had grumbled about farm animals not being pets, but no one thought seriously of stopping Reuben, for he did have a way with animals. His special friend was Nellie, a horse he had raised from a colt. One evening Ma said to me, "Mabel, put on your coat and run out to the barn. Ask Pa to bring some eggs when he comes in." I hurried quickly across the frosty yard to deliver the message. I, too, had been a frequent visitor to the barn, but I wasn't old enough yet to help with the animals, and they never paid much attention to me. This evening, however, was different. Just outside the barn door stood Nellie. Before I could enter, she had banged her head against my stomach, and I sat down hard. Reuben came running when he heard me scream and led Nellie away from the door. When he picked me up and brushed me off, he said to Pa, "Whatever got into that horse? She's never done that before." "I guess Mabel startled her, running up like that," replied Pa. "I don't think Nellie meant to hurt her." Nevertheless, when I went to the barn the next morning, I was careful to walk a long way around Nellie. I needn't have bothered. She didn't even notice me. The following Sunday, Reuben hitched Nellie to the buggy for our trip to church. Of course I was wearing my new coat, and as I walked in front of the horse to get in the buggy, Nellie reached out again and butted me with her head. This time, before Pa could reach me, Nellie was chewing on one of my coat buttons. "Now what did she do that for?" asked Ma. "What's the matter with that horse, anyway? Mabel, have you been teasing her?" No, I had not. In fact, I had been going out of my way to stay away from her. There seemed to be no reason for a gentle horse to suddenly begin knocking a little girl around. The odd thing was that Nellie didn't do it every time she saw me. Most of the time she paid no attention to me at all. Finally, after several encounters where the horse had managed to chew my coat buttons before someone could rescue me, Reuben came up with the answer. "Ma," he said, "Nellie only goes after Mabel when she has that coat on. I think Nellie remembers those buttons from when they were on my coat. I trained her to shake the front of my coat to get sugar." I think that's what she wants, and she isn't just knocking Mabel down to be mean." But Ma was doubtful. "I know you think that horse is pretty smart," she told Reuben, "but she isn't smart enough to remember buttons." However, when Nellie continued to make life miserable for me whenever I wore that coat, Ma began to change her mind. Finally, one day she said to Pa, "I believe Reuben is right about that coat. Maybe I'd better change the buttons and see if Nellie will leave Mabel alone." So I had my wish after all. Pa and I made the trip to town and picked out new buttons for my coat, and sure enough, Nellie didn't do any more than look at me when I walked past her. The old buttons went into Ma's sewing basket, and Reuben bragged to his friends about the smart horse he had. Grandma returned to her work, and I examined the buttons closely, trying to imagine Grandma as a little girl having her buttons chewed by a smart horse. End of chapter 9.